we have our third presentation. It's about converting on AI. A number of organizations have invested and continue to invest in AI programs. We'll learn about how these programs are being leveraged to accelerate decisions in the marketplace and their economic impact we are seeing with AI. So our speaker, Mario Morgado, is a senior lead with Omnia AI, Deloitte's AI practice. He is trusted advisor with over 25 years of experience, a technology leader in master data management, cloud analytics, and large-scale transformation and modernization projects. So we'll invite him to grab the mic, or you already?
I think this, can everyone hear me, or? Seems like it's working. All right, perfect. So thanks. I guess the advantage of being last is I'm actually holding you up from drinks and something to eat at the end, so I'll be quick. And I think we're also, behind schedule too. So a couple of things. The other advantage of being last is you get to sort of think about what all the other speakers before you sort of said and whether or not that's relevant to the speak that I have or not, and how to draw those parallels. Dr. Goldenberg, great presentation, loved it. And some of the things I think that she touched on we'll cover a little bit in terms of how we actually convert on AI. So, is this working? Oh, got it to work. There we go, perfect. Okay, so essentially a little bit about me. So we talked about, so I've been doing this for about 25 plus years. And usually when I do a presentation, I try to tell you a little bit about me. So I've done everything from, startups out of university. I've built a company with some colleagues. We sold it. We did quite well. I've been in the healthcare industry for a few years. And then I came to Deloitte, and I just absolutely love it here. Another thing about me, I'm a fanatic about football, American football, not European football. I do follow both. But American football, I've been coaching football for about 4 years. I won't tell you who my team is because that could start a riot, so we'll leave that at that. And something, I also secretly play Fortnite at night. When my kids go to bed, that's what I do. I won't tell them all, but I have a high, well, yeah. Now it won't be a secret because we're recording this. I just found that out. My kids might watch this later. That's a problem. Okay, so a couple of things. So AI and machine learning, deep learning, it's both a science as well as an art. And I think that we saw that both from a clinical perspective, from a financial perspective, whether we're looking at using AI for AML to identify fraud, whether it's from a risk perspective. There is, a lot of it is a lot of research. I think one of the points that Dr. Goldenberg pointed out, and one of the things that you saw, is that sometimes you're answering questions that no one cares about. And I think that that's critical when you're going down this process of looking at what algorithm, what model you're going to build, is that you're sort of hyper-focused around what the outcome needs to be. Data is definitely absolutely essential, and in my mind, I'm very passionate about data. I see data as sort of the God particle around, answering questions. And so with that, I think that there's a delicate balance between research and revenue, and translating, what is sort of really, really interesting work to what is, driving insights and outcomes for organizations that ultimately get to pay for us to stay at work. Right? So I think some of those things that we need to sort of balance out there. So some of the things, understanding, tactical moves or tactical AI, and I think that those are, looking for very tactical projects that you sort of engage in versus strategic projects. So to me, tactical projects help you get those quick wins and buy-in from an organization, from your leadership teams. But to do AI at scale, you need a strategic plan to do that. And I don't think that sort of the longevity of an AI project or a machine learning project can gain enough traction if you don't address it from a strategic perspective. And that's everything from infrastructure to availability of data, to availability of talent, to availability of resources, to the actual questions that you're going to answer. And so I think fundamentally, if you don't know the questions that you're trying to answer, you need to figure that out first before you go down this road. I think that a lot of organizations are sort of on this bandwagon that I want to do AI, but they haven't fully figured out what the AI is that they're going to do. Everybody wants to build an algorithm, but they haven't fully figured out what the algorithm is going to do yet, what questions that they want to answer, but it's really cool stuff. And so some of the things that, you know, I'm a very hands-on person. So as a football coach, and the reason I put that up there is I spent a lot of time, football coaches are notorious for drawing up plays sort of on the fly, you know, for their team. So in doing that, oftentimes when you watch your players in a game, you sort of see one picture versus what they actually did. And that's because I coach kids who, you know, sometimes you tell them to go left and their left is the other left. So, so some of the things that I have done sort of on my own is I've taken footage of our kids playing football, overlaid my playbook on top of that, and tried to make predictions as to why a certain play worked or didn't work. Kind of interesting for me. Might be interesting for someone in the NFL if they were trying to, you know, hedge their bets in Las Vegas as to whether or not, you know, the Rams would win or Patriots would win. So those are some of the things. Well, it got really loud all of a sudden. So I mean, interesting work, but for me more to sort of understand what is going on as opposed to, you know, is there sort of value, is there a valuable outcome? And to me, I think that the power of AI is the ability to help us understand what the next outcome might be. So in a clinical practice, to help a physician make a decision what the outcome might be. In an industrial, using Andrew's example, to help someone from who's working on the field to understand, you know, 10 minutes before, an hour before, that there may be a maintenance issue that he needs to send a crew out to go and address that maintenance issue. If it's a safety issue, you know, that we're taking photographs and understanding in real time live video of scenarios in a factory of an oil spill that could cause an accident, sending out a crew to clean that up. So these are all driven by AI, whether it's, you know, I think we've moved well beyond sort of understanding, is this a cat or is this a dog, to now understanding what is the real outcome and how do we apply that. So that's essentially the talk. So some of the things I wanted to drive on is what are some of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace around the uses of AI. And so there's an increased demand for data integration at a massive scale. And so not only our organization, I heard a couple of questions around people asking, well, where are you getting the data? I don't think that there's a question of where we get the data, it's whether or not the data is actually relevant to answering your question. And that's part of sort of feature engineering and understanding that. There's a massive amounts of data. It's now sort of, we're in a position of how do you weed out the noise? How do you understand what is the data that's really relevant from the data that isn't relevant to help you answer the question? So we're finding that, you know, sometimes adding all of the volumes of data, so we'll look at an example that we walked through, adding data, for example, weather patterns. Interesting, but is that really relevant to help us understand the answer to the question that we're chasing? Building capabilities with leading technology at reduced cost. So we heard a question earlier around how do we make this accessible sort of to the masses? And I think that, you know, cloud technology is helping us get there. I know that the algorithm that I was, or the analysis that I was doing around football plays, you know, cost me $300 over the last 2 years. And this is analyzing not a lot of data, maybe about 150 gigs worth of video data, which is about one season. So I did that a couple of times, went through, got some predictions. But I mean, I think at scale, as we look at, you know, sort of larger areas, I think that the cost around cloud computing is now attainable by a number of organizations. And so that's changing. The depth of analysis is increasing. So some of the things that Dr. Goldenberg touched on, you know, it is really just scratching the surface of some of the things that some of the people are doing in healthcare. Genome AI is huge right now, hugely complex. Also hugely complex from a compute perspective and being able to manage the massive amounts of data. Increased sensitivity around security and privacy. Things around AI ethics. Are you using the data for the right purposes? How do you know, where's that line you draw in the sand, even if we look at the most simplest of things, like recommendation engines for retailers, Amazon, Walmart's. Where do you draw the line between kind of creepy, you know, how much do you really need to know about me as a person, and me understanding that absolutely you need that 75-inch plasma TV or LCD. I mean, I need one. Everybody needs one in their bathroom or something, right? So anyway, I think ultimately there's that question around ethics and whether or not you're using the data for the right purposes is always going to be there. And I don't think that technology is necessarily going to drive solutions around that as much as process and policies and procedures need to do that. So a lot of large organizations like Google, like Facebook, like Microsoft are having those types of conversations with world leaders to understand how do we drive the right process and the right procedures to address things like AI ethics, to drive things like privacy and security concerns. And data is becoming the driving force in transformational initiative around customer centricity. So, you know, not only in healthcare, but we find at Deloitte, so as I said, so I'm sort of the cloud data engineering senior manager. So what I find is a lot of the things that our clients are asking is, how do I get more personal with my customer? How do I understand what they want before they want it? Which is kind of creepy, right? Because you got to draw that line around privacy and security, how much you know. How do you predict whether or not they're going to come back the next time? How are you going to predict whether or not they were actually satisfied with the services that you delivered? So those are all concerns, and that hypersensitivity and customer sensitivity is essentially important. And so the right-hand side, I won't sort of speak to all the points, but I think that cloud really helps us enable a lot of those things. So some market use cases. So I think Andrew touched on a couple of them. We'll just go through a few more. So resource optimization, asset management, huge right now. People wanting to understand, and a lot of this comes back to, you know, everyone's heard, I got to do more with less, right? And the only way to do more with less is to understand how do you make fact-based decisions on whether or not you need more money to buy additional equipment, right? Are your assets that you have within your organization truly optimized? Food safety and compliance, huge right now. I mean, who hasn't seen the video about plastic rice? I mean, everybody's seen this, right? So, I mean, how do you understand in the food processing, because people are consuming and so much food at such a rapid pace, how do you control the quality of that food? How do you understand through visual analysis and AI whether or not, you know, food has spoiled on an assembly line that you need to now pull out and address that in a more meaningful way, right? How do you address things like, you know, where a specific food product spoiled and how pervasive that might be in the marketplace, and which areas, which lot numbers you need to pull, and how do you get there? How do you anticipate that before that becomes a problem? So we're seeing a lot of that. Anti-money laundering. So as I said, I mean, big push on this in terms of understanding, you know, how people are laundering money. You know what? As intelligent as all of the collective minds in this room are, there's probably 10 rooms with as much talent looking for ways to get around whatever it is that we're building. How do you you know, figure out, you know, how do I launder my money more effectively, right? And you got to think, people with this money, they're hiring all kinds of these AI scientists to figure out, hey, you got to beat all that side of the room. These guys on this side of the room, you got to beat those sides on the room. They're protecting the money. You got to figure out how I got to launder my money, right? And I got all the money, so I'm going to pay the money, right? So sort of that process is going to exist, right? And so that goes back to sort of our AI ethics and privacy and security. So that's a big thing that I think people need to figure out. Autonomous drill and blasting. So this is more in Andrew's area. You know, understanding how we're going to make holes in the earth, right? Where am I going to blast, you know, great big holes in the earth to look for gas pockets, you know, whether I'm, you know, looking for natural gas, whether I'm looking for oil spots, you know, all of that needs to be understood. So doing geothermal analysis. Virtual contact centers, who's not called Rogers lately? You know, Rogers, who's not called Bell lately? Who hasn't called a telecom lately? So they are spending millions of dollars on huge call centers to manage traffic. People calling in with, you know, my bill is not right. Surprise, surprise, right? My service isn't good. Surprise, surprise. So they're looking to spend money on how do I direct those calls through a chatbot or an agent using, Google's duplex. Everyone's seeing Google, the video where they book a hair salon appointment. Well, how do you take that same utterance and that same intelligence to now say, yeah, I understand why your bill is so high, but we're going to charge you more next month. So, at any rate, you get what I'm getting at, right? So essentially, we need to understand how do we use that in that context, and we find a lot of that's happening. Is that my time? Because I could leave. Customer personalization, also really, really big. I think probably one of our at Deloitte, some of the things that we focus highly on is hypersensitive customer care in terms of how do we get more personal with our customers. So one of the things that we focus on a lot. And I won't talk about DTRAX because I think we talked about that in the beginning, and CRISP. So I want to take you through a little bit of a story around what we did at City of Winnipeg. So at City of Winnipeg, and Andrew touched a little bit on safety analytics. So some of the things that we did, so interesting versus AI. So the first slide here talks about some really interesting facts about all of the things happening within waste and water department at the City of Winnipeg. So these are things like how many slip and falls do they have? How many people are getting injured by being hit by a man sewer cover? How many people are hurt because they fell off the train? They operate a train at the City of Winnipeg Water Department. How many people are getting hit by a garbage can? How many people are bit by a dog? So many different things, right? So they gather all this data because people, what ends up happening is they fill out this report. This report is highly contextual, and they're writing it down, and I got bit by a dog. It hurt. And so what ultimately that translates in business terms is I got to pay that employee to stay at home to treat the fact that they got bit by a dog, right? So all of this is sort of interesting analytic information, and this is sort of a great way to visualize it. Where does AI fit in? Well, AI fits in us understanding what are some of the things contributing to those risk factors. So can we address that? Can we just, using an entropy model, take a look at, is the campaign that we ran around education, did that change anything? Did the new safety shoes that we asked people to wear, is that changing anything? What can we do to minimize risk around safety incidents that are happening at the City of Winnipeg? And ultimately, this was the unfortunate part is that we didn't have enough data to answer the question because we didn't have enough time to look for the data. It's not that the data didn't exist, but the dirtiness or the quality of that data was insufficient to really identify that this was a bigger risk factor than that. And so our scale of how far that sort of fell in our linear model and our entropy model was just not effective enough for us to make that determination. So the key thing that we went back to the City of Winnipeg is we need to add more analysis around how do we get the data? How do we go from people filling out paper forms and converting that into meaningful data that we can use in our analysis? And we can identify certain patterns. The next example, water meters. So everybody's got a water meter in the City of Winnipeg, and some of them are 40 years old, some of them are 50 years old, some of them are 10 years old. So anything that's 10 years old or newer is on newer technology and actually sends real-time data through a wireless network back to the City of Winnipeg. So they collected real-time data on an actual basis based on consumption. Well, all of the old meters that they have almost zero data other than someone picks up the phone and they say, yeah, my meter reading's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 9. Then the next month, the guy calls in and says, here's my meter reading. So they have this for the last 10 years for their entire population. So I think they're about 400,000, something like that. Don't quote me on the City of Winnipeg, I'm not sure. Despite the fact that I was there all winter, it's cold in Winnipeg. So interesting thing. So again, the difference between interesting and AI, I think. So the outcome, the question that we were really trying to answer for the City of Winnipeg is given a certain budget. So given a budget that I have, capital budget, what meters can I leverage to change that will fit in that capital budget? So I only have $10 million to spend on replacing water meters. Which of the hundreds of thousands of water meters that I have in the marketplace really makes sense to change first? And so we could do that by simple analytics, just pick the oldest meters. However, not necessarily are the oldest meters the right meters to pick, because sometimes those older meters are actually reading better than newer meters. which sort of that tried to tale of, if it's, just because it's old doesn't mean it's broken. I tell my kids that all the time, but they don't believe me. So what we found out is that there are a number of factors that lead into us understanding the answer to that question. And age isn't just the factor, it is one of many factors. Also being, where is the meter installed? When was it installed? How was it installed? Which company installed it? What equipment was used to do the installation? Is there copper piping? Is there lead piping? How is it connected back into the infrastructure in the city? All of those factors, we use that to understand how are we going to leverage that information to come up with the right set of meters to say, these are the meters that, if replaced, are going to generate more revenue for the city, right? And, of course, we all love paying our water bill. So for the city, what we were able to find out in a very short period of time is that if they could pick certain meters, we could actually generate them $10 million in additional revenue year over year. And so with this model, what we did is we could identify exactly which features were the most telling to say which meters are the ones that you should be replacing, because those meters, if replaced, generate the most amount of revenue, given the new meter type that you're now going to put in there, right? So that was one of the key facts that we were able to understand. Excuse me. So I'll leave you with one last use case that I'll walk through. So one of the things that Deloitte has been working on is, going back to sort of this hypersensitive care, is we feel that, I think some people probably know about the Amazon, I think it's Amazon, yeah. So the Amazon has stores in the US where you walk in, you don't even pay, you just pick stuff off the shelf, right? And you walk out and that's great. It's like, legal stealing, I feel. But at some point you get a bill, right? So what we find is that I think that there's going to be a marketplace where people will want to use something like a Google Assistant or something like Amazon Alexa and order their stuff, their shopping online. So this is and what essentially this presents is a different digital channel to customers. So essentially you'll be able to go to your Google Assistant and say, hey, I need to order some groceries. And it'll walk through and it'll understand your voice and it'll go and say, well, where do you want to order from? I want to order it from, I don't know, Zehrs, or I think in town you got, what do you got in town? Loblaws, right? So I want to order from Loblaws. I want you to tell me I need to order some chicken. It'll go through and say, okay, well, what kind of chicken? What did you order last time? What's good? What's not good? What's on sale? Are you a cheap buyer? Are you an expensive buyer? Understand all of those concepts and come up with the right sort of set of criteria to now, move you down the process. So understanding things like natural language. But as a consumer, interesting, but I don't want to talk to a computer. I don't want to feel like I'm talking to a computer. I may actually talk to a computer, but I don't want to feel like there's a computer on the other side. So a lot of what we're doing is looking at how do you make that more personal, through utterances and understanding, what people are thinking and being able to be more predictive in that sense. So using a combination of natural language processing, our digital assistant, and a back-end sort of retail shop, we can now go into providing that digital experience.